pledge, please. Thank you, Bill.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Can we have a motion for approval of the minutes of April 6th, please?
I move we approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. At this time, if there's anybody with new public business that's not on the agenda, please raise your hand, and I'm looking for somebody specifically, way over here. Representative, please go to the microphone at the podium. And Bill, as she walks up there, would you kindly join her at the podium?
Oh, jeez. Did you return that TV production book?
On this occasion of your...
Speak into the microphone, please.
Gotcha, okay. Bill, on this occasion of your last meeting as a member of the Select Board, Board of Selectmen, when you were elected 15 years ago, I thought it fitting that we just take note of the end of an era, really. I had kids at Highland School when you were elected. So you've been on this board through a very long stretch. I just want to, here, I'll read it, we can read it together. Be it here known to all that the Massachusetts House of Representatives offers its sincerest congratulations to William Hobart Clark Jr. in recognition of 15 years of dedicated service on the Danvers Board of Selectmen, 2006 to 2021. The entire membership extends its very best wishes and expresses the hope for future good fortune and continued success in all endeavors.
Thank you, Sally.
And so, with that, my friend.
Thank you very much. I just want to say briefly, since Sally's here, Sally and I go back a long ways. I had her in TV production her senior year, and one of the funniest things I ever did was when she first got elected back. What year was that? No, I had a videotape of her. We used to do a project, Who Am I? And she was projecting what she wanted to do when she was a senior in high school. And it was Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Bill.
Anyone else with new public business? Mr. Bradstreet?
Bill Bradstreet, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. I had two questions. One is, what determines the start time of the meetings? Tonight it's 5:30, normally it's 7. How is that determined?
So, Bill, this past year with COVID, with meeting on Zoom, if you will, or WebEx, Microsoft, whatever, those meetings sometimes were difficult, but we did them earlier as a routine. And then we wanted to start early on a regular basis, and we started at 5:30 on the first Tuesday of the month, but out of deference to Mr. Clark's responsibilities with the Topsfield Fair and his meeting of the third Thursday, we kept it at 7. This being his last meeting, and he said he was available tonight at 5:30, which was agreeable because we have all these wonderful people here to speak to us tonight. And going forwards, next month, the first meetings in May, the 2 meetings in May, will be at 6 o'clock. Not to confuse it with other boards. And in June, we have been requested to change it to the following week instead of the 15th for somebody's personal business. And so that we don't conflict with the planning board on Tuesday, the 22nd, we're doing it Thursday, the 24th. My hope is 6 o'clock, but after we reorganize, we'll decide what the times going forwards will be. So it's a long, convoluted answer, but
We're working on
it's
it.
the will of the board.
We're working on it.
We'll get to a standard time so everybody knows what the time is.
The other question was, and I'm not trying to be confrontational. On April 13th, the Finance Committee discussed the electric department budget. One item that was mentioned was the line item on the bill, customer charge. How was this charge determined? The charge on my bill is $7.50. How was this, again, how was the amount determined? Was this item notified on the bill as being added to the bill? Was it possibly something printed that notified us that this was coming? As I say, it showed up, I think my last bill was the third time I think it showed up. Again, how much, or how was it decided the amount?
So the electric board voted back in March, I think, to add a new fee to all electric bills. Residential bills were determined to be $7.50, and small electric has a figure, medium electric has a figure, and large electric has a figure. And I don't have those numbers right off the top of my head, but I can tell you that my small general electric commercial, 25% of the bill is this new fee. We've discussed it on this board, we discussed it at the budget hearing. We're waiting to hear if the electric board took another vote to reanalyze their thought process. So I don't have an answer yet.
Again, the 750 is one thing. Where, unless you just explained it to me and I missed it, where is this 750 times, how many customers going to end up? What's it going to be used for?
All the residential electric bills get that 750.
Okay, and then where is it used once it's collected, I guess?
Until I don't have any further information for you, perhaps the town manager may offer something.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The light board went through a cost of service study last year. It's something the board's actually been talking about for the better part of 15 years. Most municipal light plants and private light departments have a base charge in their bill. We've had one in our water bills for some time. There's actually there's an explanation of the bill on the website. If you go to the electric division portion of the webpage, you'll find a detailed explanation of each piece of the bill. But to answer your question, the electric department's annual budget is roughly $40 million. So the $7.50 charge for a residential meter does not increase that budget. What happens is the time of use charges go down and are offset by the base charge. And the base charge is intended to capture the basic cost to maintain the system and make sure that it's there when it's needed. So I think that the analysis that the light board did was that a residential user using, and I'm going to get this wrong, somewhere between 1,000 and 1,200 kilowatt hours per month, the decrease in their per kilowatt charge fully offsets the $7.50 base charge. So their bill doesn't change at all. And depending on whether your use is higher or lower than that, you may actually see an increase or a decrease from your base charge. But I would start with the website, and from there, if you wanted to reach out to Clint Allen in the electric department or even the light board members, they could give you more detail.
Again, I find it confusing that we have water charge, electric charge. Trying to conserve things means we use less of them. So it should save us money, but because we're not using enough, it tends to cost more. So you have one side, conservation, fighting the revenue side. Is that, I mean, how do you...
We should discuss that over a cup of coffee in an hour. The water and electric are very different problems. But
we'll work on it.
yeah, there you go.
All right.
Thank you, Bill. Anyone else with new public business? Nope, thank you. A public hearing will be held under Chapter 138 of the General Laws on the application of J&J 156 Danvers, Inc., DBA J&J Asian Cuisine and Lounge, 156 Andover Street, for the transfer of an all-alcoholic license. This license previously held by Tavern at 156, and alteration of premises at that location. Is there someone here to speak to this? Please go to the microphone and introduce yourself. Bring the all the parties with you.
Good evening. My name is Wei Jia. I'm an attorney with office in Boston. And with me is the proposed manager, Xiaoyun Ling.
Yes.
And before the board is a application for the transfer for all alcohol beverage license, and also a general application for common victuals license. I represent this J&J 156 Danvers, Inc. And it's a newly incorporated business. And it has signed a 10-year lease with the landlord at the premises of 156 Andover Street. And in order to open a Japanese restaurant, it's going to be called J&J Asian Cuisine and Lounge. And this is a over 60,000 square feet premises, multiple levels with basement, and with a proposed seating capacity of 94. The company has 4 shareholders, actually it's 2 families, 2 couples, friends, and 4 shareholders, husband and wife, and the husband and wife, 25 each. And included in the package is also financial documents to show the source of their income. The 2 families plan to invest a total of, how much? $130,000 for the renovation remodeling of the premises, including inventory and furniture equipment to start the business. And proposed manager Xiaoyun Ling has a 10 years experience as assistant manager for the 2 different family restaurants. One in Changlong Sing and Changlong Inc. That's in
Plastow, New Hampshire.
New Hampshire. That's one of the restaurants. The other one
The other one was in the Point in Littleton.
in Littleton, Massachusetts. So she has experience of operating a restaurant, managing a restaurant, including the serving of liquor. And she is, and with other shareholders, or tip certified for this purpose. And we're welcoming any questions the board might have.
Thank you. Bill, any questions?
No questions. I read over the application, and I think it's very fine.
Thank you. Maureen?
No questions.
Gardner?
So my usual questions to the manager is I see you're going to be here 40 hours, and I see you've been safe serve since 2019, so I'm happy with those answers. I just want to make sure that there will be someone who is safe serve certified on staff when the restaurant is open, whether it be you or someone else.
Yes, all of us will be, not all of us, at least 2 of us will be holding the ServSafe certificate.
Okay.
And all of our server will have a liquor license, like a liquor license serve certificate too.
Very good. And have you named on the liquor license application or on the liquor license form a alternate person when you're not there?
Oh, yes.
Okay,
Yeah, my partner, yeah, one of us will be there.
very good. Those are my questions. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chairman.
you.
And
Thank you,
partner
Gardner.
Shelley is sitting right there.
Great. Thank you.
David?
Nothing, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, this is a public hearing. Anyone in the public have any questions?
Make a motion, we close the public hearing?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Thank you. What's the will of the board?
I'll make a motion that it's accepted as presented.
Second the motion.
Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Thank you. Good luck. When do
Thank you very
think you'll
much.
open?
I would say hopefully Zoom, but no later than July.
Okay,
June,
very
yeah,
good.
we think
Good luck.
Yeah,
Welcome
around
to
the corner.
Danvers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just one.
The board will review an application by Raymond James Restoration, Inc., Dan Simone, manager, for permission to occupy the public way on the Conan Street side of People's United Bank, 1 Conan Street, for repairs to the building at that location.
Good luck.
Welcome, please introduce yourself.
Dan Simmons, senior estimator for Raymond James Restoration from Worcester. And the intent is to place overhead protective scaffold along the sidewalk in front of the People's United Bank, and place a telescoping boom man lift to do repairs on the parapet of the bank, and occupy that section of parking spaces along there during the course of the repairs. Fix the parapet and then coat it, and the town had some questions about the type of overhead protection, and I'm here to answer any questions that might be. We've submitted documents about the scaffold and overhead and the decking on top of it, and I'm here to answer any questions that there might be about it.
Thank you, sir. David
No questions, thank you.
Gardner?
Yes, 2 things. One is, when you erect the scaffolding, for other projects we've had in the square, can you wrap the handholds that go up so people don't climb with some sort of fabric or some covering on the actual legs,
Sure.
so
Yep.
that people don't, so kids aren't tempted to climb up on the scaffold?
I could probably put it 2x4 and wire them together.
Sure, anything that prevents that, I'd appreciate it. And you also said something about having a boom in parking spots in front of the bank? There aren't, could you explain?
Well, we would pay for the parking spots and put a telescoping boom, man lift, you see what I...
Well,
actually, I
I'm
didn't
sorry, what
submit that,
confuses
but-
me is there's no parking spots in front.
Well, okay. Okay, I'll give you that then. We'll have a street permit to place the boom.
Okay, all right, thank you, that's what I want to make sure, that you work
Okay.
with the police and have the
Okay.
permit and the right protections.
I'd submitted a photo of the,
Yep,
there we go.
I have that.
Okay, that's,
And I have no problem with the scaffolding, like I said, unless you wrap it, and then the, when you
Okay.
said the boom, there is no parking spots there, so.
right, okay.
I just want to make sure the police have reviewed this and it's safe for
Okay.
traffic.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Yep, not a problem.
right.
Thank you.
Gardner, to clarify, in front of the doorway, I believe there's a crosswalk.
Yeah, well, according to the picture, there is one to the, if you're facing the building to the left of the door a little bit, there is a crosswalk.
That would be a pass-through. They'd be able to
pass-through.
pass right through that.
Okay.
But I was just, the comment about the boom in a parking spot threw me a little bit.
Yes.
I just want to make sure it's safe there.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, I'm all set.
Everything would be
Mr.
ADA
Chairman,
compliant.
I think.
What did you say?
Everything would be ADA compliant.
Thank you.
I think what he might be referring to is after the crosswalk in the photo to the left. There are parking spaces there. We just want to make sure that everything's safe because it is a heavily trafficked area. You'll have a
Absolutely.
police detail.
Yeah.
And
We're used to
everything, so-
working in cities all the time, Worcester,
Okay.
Boston, all of
Because I
them.
know there's a lot of people that walk around there. you
Yeah.
know. So, thank you.
And that's why there's police details as required until everybody's comfortable. If you want a police detail to assist people getting by, have a police detail until everything's running smoothly.
I think so. don't you? I would like to recommend that if we could.
It's up to you.
Thank you.
Sure.
All set. Bill?
Since the Chief, Acting Chief Jamie Lovell's here, I'd like to ask him a question, if I might. Is there any concern about having the lift out in front of the scaffolding at that location where there is no parking spaces? Because I know it's very heavily trafficked and the road's rather narrow at that point.
Well, part of the contract which has been submitted is barricades as required. It would be all safed up. It would be signs and barricades as required.
Yeah, I'm just asking the chief, though.
Oh, I'm sorry.
For if there's any impact on traffic.
Is it temporary during working hours, I'm assuming, the boom?
I'm sorry?
Is the boom going to be there during working hours, not left overnight?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, I think as long as someone's there working, should
Yeah.
be fine.
Yeah, and it'll never be unattended.
Thank you.
All set, Bill?
Yes, thank you.
How long do you expect that scaffolding to be up?
Probably about 2 weeks.
2 weeks? quick job. All right, what's the will of the board?
I'm sorry, one last question. Do we have dates? When you said 2 weeks, I'm going to...
Not yet. This has already taken about 3 months to get this far, so.
No, I get it, but if this is approved tonight, do you have dates on when you think you'll be erecting?
Not yet. I'd have to, once I have a permit, then we can
right.
give dates.
Mr. Chairman,
I could give you dates within 10 days from now, though.
God, I'd consider, if you don't mind, that they come back to the clerk when they know their dates.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Yeah, because I'd have to coordinate with the bank and all the various parties that are involved, so.
So, Mr. Chairman, I would move that we accept the request to put up scaffolding with the conditions that that they protect the legs from going up, being exposed for people to go up for a 1-month period based on a date given to the clerk, and that the boom is going to be used only during business hours and not stored on the street during non-construction hours.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None, thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
The board will hear the final report from the Welcoming Committee Working Group. Mr. Town Manager, is someone here to speak to this?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a group here to speak to this tonight. Mike Powers, Pam Cochran, Lieutenant Rob Sullivan, and Dee Joko are all here as part of the Welcoming Community Working Group, and they have a presentation that they prepared for the board this evening. We also have other members of the Welcoming Community Group in the audience, which we will acknowledge at some point as part of the presentation. And I think I'll turn off the first bank of lights so people can see, and then we'll turn it over.
Yeah, understood that one. Yeah, thanks. All right, great, thank you.
Welcome,
Actually,
Mike.
I'm sorry, may I, one more comment. Just so that folks at home who may be watching, the PowerPoint that the subcommittee is about to go through, as well as the report that the select board received, was put on the town website this afternoon. So if you're on the main page and you scroll just partway down that main page, there's an icon that says Welcoming Community Working Group. If you click that, it'll take you to the select board page. Alternatively, you can go straight to the select board page, and you'll find PDFs of both the report and the presentation there. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the Select Board, Town Manager, and Danvers residents. And thank you for inviting our committee to present to you this evening. This report culminates approximately 4 months of work by the dedicated, thoughtful committee members meeting as a group on 6 different occasions. The genesis of this committee and its work lies in a series of events beginning in August of last year. In August, a thin blue line American flag was attached to town fire apparatus. Citizen concerns related to the political nature of the flag and thus its appropriateness on public vehicles were made to the town manager, who in turn requested the flag's removal. Other citizens opposed that decision and launched a social media campaign and public rallies to garner support for the flag and to overturn the town manager's decision. As this slide states, the town was being swept up in something bigger than Danvers. By that we mean that the large intrusive protests, presidential political campaigning, and the appearance of wholly inappropriate symbols in Danvers Square overwhelmed the local nature of this issue and the intent of the supporters. In September, the Select Board hosted a community conversation public meeting at the high school field house for stakeholders to be heard, to express their concerns, and to share ideas. Proponents of the movement to reinstate the flag worked to gather signatures calling for a special town meeting to present a warrant requesting that the town meeting overturn the town manager's decision to remove the thin blue line flags. The forward-looking Select Board directed the town manager to form a committee to explore underlying issues related to this flag controversy. Then in October, the special town meeting was held. Floor votes were made to reaffirm town meeting support for first responders and to reject the citizen petition to overturn the decision to remove the thin blue line flag from the fire apparatus. At your October 27th meeting, the Select Board formally requested the formation of the committee to address these underlying causes. 15 individuals stepped up to work on this committee, as shown on the slide. The committee included 3 town meeting representatives, 2 members of the Select Board, members of the Human Rights and Inclusion Committee, and the North Shore NAACP, a member of the religious community leadership, and perhaps most importantly, 5 first responders, 3 from the police and 2 from the fire department. If I could ask committee members who are here, if you could please just stand up and be recognized. Good turnout tonight. This committee met in person one time and remotely for the balance of the meetings. The town manager skillfully moderated the meeting, and Human Resources Department member Giuliani Vattini was the glue that kept this process moving forward with scheduling, distributing minutes, providing necessary materials, and of course this slide presentation. On a personal note, I have been part of many, many committees over the years, and as senior statesman, I guess, or member of the committee, this was my first opportunity to work with many of my colleagues on the committee. Given the divisive nature of the events leading to these meetings, plus the fact that the meetings were virtual and not in person, we needed to depend on clear, honest communication, preparation, and respect for the process if we were to be successful. Committee member commitment to these principles is the reason we were successful in meeting your goals and is a credit to all of the individuals involved. What were the goals? Put together by you? First, to make sure first responders receive the support they need to do their job effectively. And second, to develop recommendations to make Danvers feel welcoming to our marginalized communities. Before we present our blueprint recommendations, we thought it appropriate to present a couple of short video clips discussing race relations. And if you could pay particular attention to the differences in the perspectives of whites versus minorities that are presented in these videos.
Even in a place as cool as Bloomington, even in a school as wonderful as Indiana University, there are still some corners, some pockets where stereotypes and prejudice rear their ugly heads. So I decided to bring to you this talk about jumping in to talk about race across racial lines. All right, I see you guys are nervous already. So, since I left IU, I've kind of gone on and I've written about this and I've talked about this and I've thought about this. And I found that there's 2 big obstacles to this conversation. White folks get too guilty and defensive, and black folks get too mad. But I'm really convinced that at the root of that is a difference in how different people perceive racial progress. Now, researchers at Stanford and Yale universities, they looked into this. They asked people, different persuasions, different ethnicities, how do you judge racial progress? And it turns out that black folks compare where we are now to where we ought to be. This imagined future where we're all equal. And white folks compare where we are right now to where we used to be, the journey that we made. So you ask a white person, where are we on racial progress? And they go, well, you know, we're not segregated anymore. You can have the kind of job you want regardless of who you are. We have a black president. Can you believe that? Things seem pretty cool. You ask a black person about racial progress, and they go, well, let's see, I get followed around by security every time I go in the store. I earn about 75% of what a white guy just like me earns. I'm 12 times more likely to get prison time if I get arrested on a drug charge than a white person. I'm more likely to end up on death row. You know what? Maybe things aren't quite where they need to be, right? For black folks and people of color, racial issues are security goals. They're as primal as putting food on your table or taking care of your family. Now, for a lot of white folks, racial issues are nurturance goals. They're things you do to make the world a better place. Not quite as primal as a security goal. So we're seeing the same data, we're seeing the same universe, we're just using different yardsticks to judge it. So these conversations are about inspiring people to think, right? They're about taking these thoughts. Often when we think about race, it's an implicit thought. It's something in the back of our heads. We don't think about it directly. They rattle around in the side of our brains, and they're reflex actions. And the goal of this conversation is to bring that stuff to the forefront and make you think about it. Now, I can only guarantee one thing if you have these conversations. It is going to be uncomfortable. But I tell you what, if it's uncomfortable, that means you're doing it right.
How do you feel when you hear the phrase Black Lives Matter?
Black lives do matter. We need to pay attention to some of the injustices that have happened over, the last 100 years and beyond. Where Black Lives Matter becomes confusing is when it becomes very divisive. Right now, in the midst of a political election, there's questions on whether Black Lives Matter is a social movement or is it a campaign. And I think when we pass the November elections, I think we need to focus on continuing it as a movement so we can create a successful outcome. Because if it ends on the election, then it was just a campaign.
You have something, I know.
Yeah, I mean, so the blue Lives Matter flag, right, the blue line, either on a flag or just black, blue, black, has taken on kind of a life of its own. Politically, currently, it's obviously flying on one side of the political boundary as opposed to the other. So when you see that, what do you see?
I feel frustrated because I feel as though the agenda is being moved. Here's what I mean by that. To say any life matters is to assert that we thought that life didn't matter. So to say that blue lives matter would then assert that historically we've acted as though cops' lives don't matter. Whereas Black Lives Matter, historically, we have literally acted as though Black lives don't matter. I mean, for a long time, I didn't know how to process it. I didn't know how to take it. When I hear the defund thing, I feel like some of our communities are abandoning us. Prior to May 2020 and George Floyd, we were in the midst of a pandemic. We were doing the best we can for our community. People were showing up to the station, bringing us treats. We were heroes. After that, they want to defund us. It hurts. Why does it hurt? Because I feel like for 15 years, we've made, and I can speak to all my partners in the room, we've made a lot of sacrifices to be a part of the community, to try to help people. And it felt like people were turning their backs on us. We're not perfect, but I don't think we're at a point where we can just abandon what we've built. We want to be a part of the solution. We understand that relationships are important, and inherently it's about trust. Nick, can you speak to that? Because you are actively in the field. How it makes you feel knowing you're sacrificing every day in the field, but then you might come home and see on the news or see on social media that defund the police is being chanted around the world. How does that make you feel?
So my initial response was visceral and it made me upset. Moving forward, looking into what actually defunding the police is not abolishing the police or getting rid of the police. It's restructuring policing in America. 2 weeks ago, I was doing traffic control for a women's rally protest in March in the city of Petaluma. Many of the occupants of the rally had signs defund the police. The interesting thing with our community is while they're holding signs chanting defund the police, they're walking over and saying thank you for your services and thank you for being out here. That's kind of a paradigm shift and threw me for a loop when somebody is coming and thanking me while they're holding a sign that I'm supposed to be offended by. Again, it comes down to communication and dialogue and creating that opportunity, but it's not a scary term anymore. You brought up a question earlier about the black kid running up to the white police officer, right? I want to be the person that somebody comes running up to, high fives, looks forward to guidance and so forth. How does a white officer in America bridge that gap so that a black juvenile will look to them as a role model, as a person that is positive in the community?
That's a really good question. I think first you do it on an individual level. That has to permeate society. There's a reason whenever you see a cop playing a sport with somebody in the neighborhood, the video goes viral. Because it's like a far-fetched idea. Bad news sells way better than good news. We don't do a good enough job collectively as a country is letting the good news resonate. So you do it on an individual level until it begins to become a societal thing. Because all it takes is one George Floyd situation to undermine the entire situation.
So our intent was to bring this issue local, to bring it to individuals, and to make recommendations to you as actions that can be taken as we move forward to improve relations, to recognize first responders, and to make Danvers a more welcoming committee. We'll now move on to the presentation of our recommendations, and they are divided into 4 sections. Pam Cochran, the Reverend at the Maple Street Church, will be our first presenter.
Thank you, Mike. Reverend Pam Cochran, Maple Street Church, and I want to begin by saying what a pleasure it was to serve in this working group with such positive outcomes to share. As you heard Mike share, 15 of us were formed together for this group experience, and we sat in a circle and we began sharing at our own individual level so that we could build on our abilities and desire and experience to create more active dialogue and conversation within our community. It was a wonderful way to start because we did research and shared these conversations in an open, wonderful way. Of utmost importance to a welcoming community is dialogue and engagement. From our work together, we would like to see continued exploration to create spaces and frameworks for all interested community members to continue to learn about issues related to race, diversity, equity, and inclusion. We discussed quite a bit about what these specifics would look like and ideas to share in the full report, from speaker series to start community conversations on race and inclusion, to create small, diverse programs to engage communities, even a community calendar, as well as to extend partnerships that could include the Human Rights and Inclusion Committee, Danvers Cares, Students United for Acceptance, the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, the National League of Cities Race, Equity, and Leadership, and there are many more. We also see an ongoing need to extend more surveys with the community to learn what every other person in the community is talking about in terms of, are we welcoming or unwelcoming? And extend that research and understanding, especially when it comes to welcoming our underrepresented groups. This also even reflected that maybe, we really need to look at our website and how we might make that more friendly, interactive, and useful. The second point we have is about incorporating more multicultural elements of diversity, equity, and inclusion into established local events. New ways to collaborate and expand affiliations. There are many events in this community, from the Family Festival to summer concert series. And by looking at it with this lens, we know we can extend to this collaborative nature of being more inclusive. We spent a lot of time just using the Danvers Day as an example of how we might generate conversation, understanding, and community action. The third bullet here is to consider new signage for businesses. We were inspired by some of our members bringing together signs they had seen in other communities, and This, I think, is an area that even the Human Rights and Inclusion Committee has begun to open up, and this, we were inspired to see how we might do this in a more collective way with businesses to say all are welcome here. And the fourth point goes even farther to say how we can work with local businesses to consider incentives to be this welcoming voice and sign for our community, and especially those coming into our community new or those traveling through our community. So dialogue and engagement. We experienced it, we shared in it, we believe in it, and it will lead to positive outcomes. I'd like now to introduce Dee Joko to take us to our next key recommendation.
Thank you very much, Pastor Pam. Along the same line of dialogue and engagement, we wanted to make sure that we have clear communication and outreach. And in good communication, it's imperative to be able to listen to others, have empathy, and encourage. We want to make sure that we document and communicate the good work that our first responders are already doing. Increase avenues of conversations with our citizens so that we can engage and support both members of the community at large as well as those who are marginalized. We want to have clear communications and talk about how our first responders are here to serve the community members, and emphasize the fact that they are there to help and support. We want to find ways to get out of the conventional way that policing works, and instead of decreasing the interaction with community members, we actually want to increase that interaction and make it a positive one. And we had a few examples. Hosting a use of force forum where the public can actually learn about our policies, and ask questions. That would be interesting. Reporting to the public the result of our annual bias-based review. That will create transparency and trust between our first responders and the community. Communicate the training that is already taking place with our first responders. We are very fortunate in Danvers to have a lot of local, national, and state accreditations, but most people don't know about it. So having that out there with clear communication will be a good thing and will put our residents at ease to understand that first responders are really there to serve and that they're getting the proper training to do it. Sharing and discussing crime statistics with the public. It's important that we know that. So having those clear communication will be critical to improving those relationships. We want to be very intentional when we recruit people to attend the Citizen Police Academy, which is a great program where regular folks can be embedded with the police, see what they do, and have a kind of first-hand look at what they do day in and day out. So we want to make sure that we promote the Citizen Police Academy in different ways, use different platforms, because different people have different ways to get the information. So we want to be very intentional about that. We want to increase the number of events. Like I said earlier, we don't want to decrease the police-citizen contact, but we want to actually increase it. Increase the number of events where police interact with the community. As someone once said, proximity breeds care, but distance breeds fear. So the more we get closer to our first responders, the more we interact with them. Someone was talking on the video about playing sport with a child, and that goes viral. That is the kind of interaction that we want to have. Hosting a variety of events, open houses, national night out, coffee with the police officers. And this can happen in a wide variety of ways, and from kindergarten all the way to the elderly in our community. And we don't want to just limit this to our first responders, but we also want to do the same with our local government. Implement an employee volunteer program in the community where the program will encourage local government officials and the people who work in town to have 2 or 3 days of volunteerism with a nonprofit in the community. And the list could be predetermined ahead of time. And this will make sure that the people that work in the local town government can also be embedded into the community. They can reach out, not just wait for us to go to town hall, but actually go in the community and interact with the people. And to do this, we have to leverage input from different stakeholders: the police, the Human Rights and Inclusion Committee, the schools, and different social services that we have available. And these services days, if we were to do them 2 or 3 days a year, will really continue to deepen the connection between the community and the local government. Last but not least, launch a Danvers in Action video series spotlighting that local government, things that they do, different departments. We can work with DCAT or the Danvers High School to develop the content of those series where we spotlight different things that the local government is doing. And we recognize that different platforms can reach different people. So when we do that, we want to make sure that we expand the way we reach out. And in order to have these clear communications and outreach, it's really imperative that we have good training and good organizational assessment. And for that, I'll pass it on to Lieutenant Rob Sullivan to speak to you about that.
Good evening, Rob Sullivan. I'm a lieutenant with the police department, and our next set of recommendations fall under the subject of training and organizational assessment. The first recommendation is to create a director of equity and inclusion within the town, a position that can work on training, recruitment, staff support, community events, outreach, grants and funding, communication, as well as school curricula. I was watching a CEO, I forget the business's name, the other day on CNBC, but they were talking about how their company has a DEI staff member, and that they found that having this included with programs of diversity, equity, and inclusion have led to an increased culture of trust within their organization, which in turn has produced an increased level of employee engagement, increased the ability to solve problems, and has made their business more profitable. We're seeing a lot more schools and local governments, cities and towns, establish these types of positions, and there is plenty of work to be done for this staff member. Our working group recommendation, we have 18 action items or recommendations alone, and it's just the beginning. Many of them have, as you've already heard, we broke them down into these individual sections, but a lot of them rely on one another, they support each other, and the work that needs to be done going forward would be something that the DEI staff member could serve as a point person to make sure all of these projects are on track and our goals are being met. Another important topic that the DEI staff member could focus on is that the problems and challenges that face our community members evolve, and so should our response to those challenges. One of the recommendations of one of our committee members is that this process should be forward-looking, not backwards-looking. And a DEI staff member would be able to keep their eye on the future challenges and try and find the best ways to confront them. In Dee's last section, communication and outreach, he talked about one of the recommendations of having a employee service days established. In addition to traditional nonprofit or charitable organizations, one of the areas that DEI may be able to focus on is finding volunteer opportunities that focus specifically on areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Specifically when it comes to policing, very often the only thing that people may know about us, if you've never met me, if you've never been on any committees that have worked with me, you might only know what you see on TV. You may only know that a relative was arrested, or you may only know that you got a speeding ticket. But if our officers have a chance to volunteer with these organizations, in addition to providing the support services needed by these different groups, they may have a chance to interact in new ways with the staff members as well as the clients that they serve. We can build new relationships with people that we may have never met otherwise. In addition, it provides a possibility to recruit individuals to apply for town employment or become part of our many boards and town committees. Having a DEI position flows into the next recommendation, which is compiling demographics and information on the town workforce, the town meeting, its boards and committees, and recruiting candidates broadly to ensure that local government reflects the community that it serves. We can do this in ways of choosing a more diverse group of people to attend the town's academy, Citizens Academy, as well as the police department, which runs a Citizens Police Academy. And expanding our recruitment processes to find more diverse pools of talented candidates. Prior to the formation of this committee, the town manager and his staff had already begun exploring how resumes and applications could be redacted to remove information such as race and gender to prevent bias from getting in the way of the employment process. It's also important to keep in mind that state laws and local regulations create differences in how we hire for different positions. How we hire a town manager is different from how we hire a police officer, which is also different from how we hire an administrative assistant. Having a person in a DEI staff position could be beneficial to look at all of these laws and regulations and find ways to include diversity, equity, and inclusion in all of these different hiring processes. The next recommendation is to review internal structures, processes, policies, regulations, and outcomes to ensure local government is equitable in its day-to-day practices and addresses challenges and pursues new initiatives. This is building on the work that we've already done through the years as a town, implementing the current committee recommendations for ongoing work, and continuing to look forward to address and solve future problems. We also discussed the importance of providing staff and volunteers with relevant training, support, and professional development to ensure equity and inclusion within the departments and also in service to the community. Some of these areas of training involve the understanding of how the legacy of systemic racism impacts local government today, unconscious and implicit bias, and how that manifests itself in the services that we deliver, fair and impartial policing and restorative justice as it applies to police services, as well as many other various trainings. And we also discussed that it's very important to let the public know what training our employees are completing and why, and to connect them with the core values adopted by the town of Danvers employees in 2018. One of the conversations that our working group had is that, again, for many of the people who don't know us or have a working relationship with us, especially in the police, is that it's up to them to think of us what they see on TV. If they know nothing else, they're free to assume that must be how our police department functions, or that's how our local government functions. In policing alone, many people don't know the extensive trainings that our officers, the specialized trainings we attend, from crisis intervention to verbal judo and de-escalation techniques, as well as procedural justice and implicit bias to focus on fair and impartial policing. I noted a few of these trainings in the memo that I wrote to the town manager, which outlined a few of the conversations we had at the Human Rights and Inclusion Committee. It was also important to point out that at a time when many school districts are eliminating school resource officers' positions or divisions altogether, the town is actually increasing theirs. At a time when some individuals believe that school resource officers are acting as militant disciplinarians, our school resource officers were attending specialized trainings on how to become stronger mentors to the students. So if we get that information out there about the trainings that we're doing, it'll give people a lot better understanding of what we're actually doing with and for the community. And before I hand it off for the final section to, I believe Mike is next, I just wanted to mention that Captain Lovell, Officer Costa, and myself have had numerous conversations with our fellow officers. When we explained what our committee was doing, my coworkers were humbled and grateful that a group of individuals, many of whom are not town employees, had volunteered their Friday at 4:30 every other week for several weeks, so much of their time and attention to focus on this important cause. And part of this deals specifically on addressing or recognizing police and first responders. So we are incredibly grateful for the work, the care, and dedication that all the members of this group have put into it. So we want to thank you very much.
Thank you, Lieutenant.
Thank you. And coming at it from the other side, I had prepared some comments as to how much the committee appreciated the input from police and fire. That was critical for us as non-first responders to have confidence in talking policies that we would ask you to support. And it turned out to be a great exchange, a great communication, and we appreciate that. And also, town manager was involved in a couple of those as well. So we thank you for that. The final group of recommendations we're going to talk about are going to be recognition for first responders. And the first is that we consider establishing a first responder week or period of time to recognize the importance of first responder contribution to our community. This could include not only police and fire, but EMS, healthcare, public health workers, DPW, and our utility workers, all of which contribute to the quality and culture of life here in Danvers. For an example, we have Congress has in 2018 voted a National First Responders Day in 2018. Now that was on a national scale, so there's some modeling there, there's some precedent for it. And I think it's something that could easily be incorporated and promoted through a number of the activities that this town has, in addition to attempting to create new ones. Secondly, we would ask that the town manager develop a general flag policy, okay, including sites and times where approved flags can be flown, and to create a landing page on the website for this policy. We think had that been in existence, perhaps much of the confusion could have been overcome earlier within departmental discussions. But this is a good policy to have. And once, as a committee, we get involved with this, there's a lot of organizations that have flags. There's a lot of organizations who justifiably may want to promote their organization and their message. And I believe we would be best served with a policy that addressed that specifically. The third piece that we want to talk about is the possibility of developing a unique symbol for Danvers. Selectman Trask had discussed that earlier in the process, and we have a number of opportunities here just to reach out, especially through the school programs, to see what some of our young, talented artists-to-be might be able to come up with, in addition to other residents who might be so inclined, to bring forth an image that represents Danvers in its entirety, something very unique, not the Falcon flag, but something that I don't even know what it would look like. But if we could establish a campaign to promote that, get first responders involved in the committee to review the suggestions from school groups and or interested residents throughout the community, and to be able to hopefully come to a decision and maybe move forward with a lot of paraphernalia that we can use. You know, you have flags, you have cups, you have stickers, you have all kinds of things that we might be able to use to just promote the culture of inclusion in Danvers and provide another form of recognition for residents to associate with activities going on in their town. Finally, with regard to existing flags, we're suggesting that you look at flying the National Law Enforcement and Fallen Firefighters Memorial flags during First Responder Week. Both are congressionally approved. Both are highly appropriate in terms of recognizing fallen first responders, and there are two that are on the monument in Danvers, George Norwalk and Matt Smith. George Norwalk was a police officer, and Matt Smith was a firefighter, and both of whom from Danvers and died in the line of duty. So that's something that we would recommend that the town consider as well. All of these, again, are all tied and everything's sort of linked in with all of our different recommendations. And really what we're talking about here, I think, is we're talking about improving the culture, improving the concept and the commitment to inclusiveness in our town culture. These all can work in that direction, and we think that they are all worthy endeavors over a period of time. That concludes my presentation and our presentation as a committee. But before we go to questions, there were 3 additional items that were listed in the memorandum the town manager provided to you. And those 3 points are, first, to engage new stakeholders, especially the youth in the marginalized communities, the invisible people that we have in town. We really could and should make an effort to reach out to those people, get them included in some of our activities, and in contributing to the improvement of culture and acceptance in Danvers. Secondly, to develop a theme. We have a Danvers Tomorrow theme, and we talked about that in our meetings. What would that look like? We don't have an answer for you. But certainly that perspective of developing a theme, a future theme, a goal that we're working towards, will give all of the disparate groups that we hopefully become involved in this process a common goal. If we have a common goal, if we have a common theme, we all know what we're working towards. And it can just improve the overall efficiency and the performance of these people and improve the culture in our community. Finally, implementation requires time, energy, and resources. Danvers is a tremendous community for citizen committees. As I mentioned earlier, I've been on a lot of them. And a lot of you in the room have been on a lot of them with me, and that's terrific. But we have to expand that. We have to make an effort to recognize and expand that to other people who either don't think like us, don't look like us, or people that we don't regularly cross paths with, because they too are Danvers residents. They too can realize and improve quality of life at the community level with that participation. And those people also have skills, have resources, and have contributions that we don't even know about, that could go and could improve our overall welcoming and acceptance and culture of our community on a go-forward basis. Those are the 3 points, and we are happy to take any questions. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you to your welcoming committee working group for being here tonight and all the work that you did over the past months. At this time, we'll see if there's any questions or comments from the board. We'll start with Bill.
I have no questions, but I look at this committee, and you guys and women are an all-star committee of our community, and I think that it's an indication of the direction that we can be going under the leadership of a veteran selectman, and I think it's fantastic, and it's where we should be. And I hope that any of the minorities that are in town that have not been participating in the community become involved and participate in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to this magnificent committee, and the report to our community is far more than I expected. Frankly, I didn't expect much, and I think that this is a beautiful piece of work. And when Mike mentioned, or someone mentioned, the design of some symbol to represent what the committee has done, this cover, or this symbol that you have under question mark, I just keep looking at it, and I find it really striking. In any event, it's a wonderful job, and the presentations tonight were articulate, clear, forceful, without the slightest hint of arrogance, just beautifully done, and I am very grateful that this has happened.
Thank you,
Thank you, Mr. Mills. If I may, just by explanation, all committee members were asked to submit 5 meaningful words as to what our work together meant. And then this word, what's it called? Word cloud, thank you, was put together, and the larger fonted words were the most common. So that is where that came from. So.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Maureen?
Thank you. I was one of the board members to be on this committee, and it was a pleasure serving, with all of you on this working group. I really enjoyed listening to everyone's opinions. I like what David's saying. I like, all these words, the word banks and the cloud. And we really did engage on those Friday nights for sometimes 4 to 6 or 4 to 6:30 or 7. We really did engage in a lot of great conversation. Like we've always talked about, and I was one, for the thin blue line flag, that we talked about communication being the key. And I think meeting all of you too was great, because I don't really know, living in town, not really knowing all the players here. Remember, we want to make Danvers a welcoming community. We want it to be safe for everybody. We put a lot of time and material. Steve, I got to commend you for organizing this too. This was really good. The only thing that I wanted to say is, and I think Lieutenant Sullivan was the one that picked the flags, and I did bring it up a couple of times, that I do think that we should have some kind of flags. And I was, I think, one of the only few that wanted something like this, for our flags, so everybody could see. But then again, I liked what Lieutenant Sullivan said, let's move forward. Let's bring up a bunch of ideas. We want everybody to feel comfortable. We just want to, as I said before, support the men and women that put their lives on the line every day to protect us, And I just want to thank you all for this committee and all the time that you put into it, and I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, too, was humbled to be asked to serve on this committee. I learned so much from the people on the committee. Obviously, we all have our own perspectives, we all have our own ideas, but I had to get out of myself to hear what was happening with others. we obviously think that we have ideas that are the solutions to the problem. And after the first meeting of kind of normalizing and norming, we really got down to the work of what we could do and what we could do to affect Danvers. There are many of these ideas that I really, it's hard. We got a laundry list of ideas, and I think the selectmen are going to go back and look at them, and some of them will be embraced by the town manager and don't need selectmen direction, and some of them we will want to make sure that we highlight and focus on, such as developing the flag policy and some others. And the celebrations. One of the things I'm thankful for is the representatives of the fire department and the police department weren't just the voices in the room, but they took all of this back to the unions and to the line workers who do this work, and they had a voice too. They represented the voice of, I won't say everybody on the department, but just to say that, what do you feel about this flag? What do you want out of this? What's the celebration do you want? What recognition do you want? And we heard loud and clear from the group of people, the group of police and the firefighters themselves, the police personnel themselves, what they really want, as opposed to what people outside the department think they should be receiving for celebration. Another thing that really struck home with me is Danvers is steeped in history, and we do a really good job of saying where we were, who we were. And we have a lot of programs like Family Festival and others that describe who we are now. But something Marshenda said in one of our early meetings really resonated and sticks with me today. We should be celebrating and identifying who we want to be as a community. And that's important, to have a discussion about who we want to be. What do we want to see as our future? And so I look forward to some of the action items here to celebrate and get to that future. Let's help define that future. Let's work to get to that future. There's a lot here to digest, I realize, for the people who weren't on the committee. So I'm sure the other selectmen are going to want to look at these and think about, what makes their, the top of the list, what starts first. I really like the idea of a dedicated person at Town Hall, a personnel person, dedicated to working on the inclusion aspect of this. In my company, we have two of them, and they work under human resources, and create and engage programs to include diversity. So it was my great pleasure to work with a wonderful group of people. I got a lot of new perspectives, and I thank them for the dedication and time they put towards addressing this difficult conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Gardner. So the thing now is next steps. You've done a lot of work. The town manager put together a group that we asked him to. There's a lot of good ideas. My thought is that this board reviews the 18 items that you've outlined in the 4 different sections. And at a meeting, and I'm going to suggest the second meeting in May, that this board kind of identifies the top items on their list for us to move forwards on. I don't think we can move forwards on 18 items at once, but kind of prioritize. I've already circled my 8 items that I think are important. So, board members, if you'll look at this, and perhaps, Steve, does that make sense, the second meeting in May, to have a conversation on these items and start to move forwards?
I think it does. That's something we discussed as a committee, is that we wanted to make a point of not rank ordering any of these. There's a lot that overlap, a lot that are standalone. We also spent time talking about the fact that this document's now public. Some of these recommendations may start moving on their own without any action by anybody in this room. But I think that makes sense for the board to have some time to think about and reflect on the document, talk to stakeholders, and we can do some prioritizing in May. I think that makes perfect sense.
Great. So that's what we'll do. At the second May meeting, we'll discuss this document and move forwards. The last thing I want to do is put it to one side and think about it. I think we need to take action and move forwards. It's like driving a car. We got to put the foot in the gas pedal right now to get someplace. All right, board members, is that agreeable?
At the speed limit.
Sure.
At the speed limit.
At the speed limit, of course. Well, I'm a type A driver, they tell me, but that's okay. Good, so we'll do that, Steve?
Yes, and I would echo some of the sentiments that the committee members made. I think a lot of folks were nervous at the start of this process, but we had our first meeting in this room in December, and we met throughout the winter and early spring, and they weren't kidding. It was 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. on a Friday evening, where most of our meeting, we sort of randomly landed on that, and then it stuck. And I kept being amazed that everybody kept coming back, and it was meaningful work. I've been in local government for 15 years, and this is some of the most enjoyable work that I've done, was listening to the members of this committee share ideas and concerns and hopes and come together to put this document together, which really was collaborative and iterative. It started with brainstorming in small groups, and then it became a very rough document, and over the course of the months it became refined and it turned into what you received Friday. And as I mentioned at the beginning, it is on the website, so anybody who's watching and wants to take a look at it for themselves is welcome to do so. My contact information is also on the website, and I'd be happy to take input, feedback, thoughts from anybody before the 20th of May. So thank you.
All right, very good. Thank you, Mike. Thank you for the committee. And Steve, thank you for putting this committee together.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to publicly thank the committee.
You're welcome to stay for the next items if you like.
That's a polite way of saying if you want to leave now, you're perfectly welcome.
Well, now's the opportunity. Thank you. Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you in the morning.
Robert.
Thank you.
Mike?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Nice job, Rob. Great job, Mike.
The board will hear a request to name the Liberty Street Bridge in honor of the Soucy brothers. Mr. Town Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe we have a group of people here tonight who would like to address the board. I don't know if Dick Moody from the Danvers Veterans Council wants to go first. But I can, while he's making his way to the microphone, I can explain a little bit. You received some materials with your packets. These materials, Dick and his team spent considerable time assembling in the past few months, and they waited patiently while the Select Board developed and reviewed a naming rights policy for town-owned property. And with the adoption of that policy, Mr. Moody was able to finalize his materials for the board tonight for the consideration that I'm sure he's about to share with you. So,
thank you. Thank you, Steve. I had some friends in Vietnam that took away one of my lungs, so I can't breathe very good with these things on. So with your indulgence, I'll just pull it below my nose. You know, I've been associated with the military for about...
At home, for the folks at home, somebody might not know you, Dick.
Pardon me?
Introduce yourself.
Oh, thank you, Dan. My name is Dick Moody. I'm the president of the Danvers Veterans Council. And as I started to say, I'm here tonight for a couple of reasons. The first is that because I've been associated with the military for about 50 or so years, I've really come to appreciate the work of the soldier and the plight that they have. And so whenever we have the opportunity to do some kind of recognition of the men and women who have served our country, I really like to jump at it. And quite frankly, I was very, very impressed. Steve, I want to say this to you. When we first talked, I understood that the town had to come up with a policy on how to name memorials, street signs, things like this that would give some recognition to the men and women in the past that have served our country. And our town manager said to me, look, we've got to come up with a policy ourselves, so it will probably be a long time before we'll be able to put any recommendations into effect. And I am amazed at how fast you and your people came together on that. I thought it was wonderful. Yeah. And let me just say that there are two things I'd like to say. One is that we had, and you may or may not know this, we have only one Medal of Honor recipient buried in the town of Danvers. And the grave at Walnut Grove was in very, very bad shape. And we had one of the Danvers residents come forward totally on his own, Mr. Ken Reardon, to design and come up with a suitable, which turned out to be a beautiful recognition of our Medal of Honor recipient. Ken, I'd like you to come up here for a minute, if you would, and tell us just a little bit about what you did at your own expense on this. This is at Walnut Grove, the Medal of Honor recipient.
Good evening, Town Manager, Select Board. Yeah, a couple of years ago, that's when we didn't need the masks at the Thorpe School. They mentioned about this individual at Walnut Grove, Medal of Honor, and so I decided I'd fight for it, and I did it. And as I did it, I have a lot of respect for our veterans and our military. I mean, they're number one with me. And so as I was doing it with Dick Moody and Peter Morandi was involved also, I come up with the idea of being a plaque that I had made. And should I get into that now?
Go ahead.
So why I'm here tonight is myself, my wife Donna, and my family would like to donate a
Ken,
plaque.
excuse me, and Dick, that's the next agenda item.
Okay,
We're not
I'll
going to
wait.
mix them. We want to give Ken his due time,
Okay,
the
I'll
appropriate
wait.
time, okay?
Okay. But anyway,
You'll be back.
I took the plaque out of the ground at Walnut Grove. There was a big chunk of cement connected to it. We thought it was just stuck in the ground with some pins. And with the help of some of the people in the town, they helped me get it out of the hole. You know, there was a big glob of cement under it. And I refinished the plaque. I called the plaque company down in Pennsylvania how you refinish it. And I mounted it on a piece of granite that I got up at the town dump. It was donated. And had it mounted at Walnut Grove. So rather than being down on the ground now, it's straight up, and you can read this Medal of Honor plaque down here. It's right next to the brick building. I believe that's where they put people during the winter. You know, and it's up on the hill, and it's facing so everybody can see it, and there's the American flag in it.
Very good. Thank you, Ken.
If you go into Walnut Grove, you will see this gravestone just a few hundred feet down on the left-hand side. And it's very well done. Ken went ahead and put a permanent fixture so we can put a flag in there whenever we wish. And people can read it from the street, which is really good because it was on a very, very badly located up on the side of a hill. And anybody with any kind of a disability or age problem couldn't really see it. So now they can, and our hats off to Ken Reardon for doing that on his own to make it very visible for the town. Dan, do you want me to go into the second part?
Well, you're here for the Susi brothers, are you not?
Okay, yes, I am.
Please.
I don't know how many of you folks know that there was one family in town who was composed of 6 sons, and all 6 went into the military during World War II, and a couple of them stayed around and went into Korea. I had sent to you the letter to explain this, and Janine Nash, who was the granddaughter of one of the soldiers, is here tonight, and she went ahead, also wrote a letter, and put a picture of them in the letter. So I'm hoping that everybody's had the opportunity to get an idea of what we're looking for. Every year, when the Susie boys were growing up, and they lived right down the port, right where Pulaski Street branches off of water, and they would come over to the Danvers Port Bridge. They do the fishing all the time, went to Danvers schools, went into the military, and came back to Danvers. And that's no small feat for a family of 6 brothers to all make it back, considering they were in very, very difficult terrain during the war. And we wanted to see if we could honor them by placing a plaque, signpost, or some kind of memorial at some place. Now, the Danvers Port Bridge, we understand, was on a state road, had already been named, so we were looking for other locations. And Janine came to me one night and said, what about the Liberty Street Bridge, which we thought was not a state road, and we didn't see any markings along the side to indicate that there was already a sign on there. If you folks know of one, you can let us know tonight. But right now, we're going into it thinking that it might be a possibility. I would like to have Janine come up and talk just quickly about her brothers, if you folks think we have time to do that.
Oh, certainly, would love to hear from her.
Okay.
Please.
This is Janine Nash. She is the granddaughter of one of the brothers.
Thank you, Dick.
Welcome.
I'm Janine Nash. I'm actually the daughter, because I'm the youngest of 12. I guess I seem younger. But I'm the daughter of Roland Susie, who's one of the brothers.
Speak into the microphone, please.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
I'm the daughter of one of the brothers. So good evening. I'd like to thank Dick and the Veterans Council for their attentiveness and hard work with regard to this matter. On behalf of the Susie family, I would like to express how grateful I am for the board's consideration of dedicating the Liberty Street Bridge in honor of the Susie brothers. It means the world to all of us that the brothers' hard work, commitment, and our family's sacrifice during the World War II era may be recognized in such a meaningful way. As you may have heard during my Veteran Days presentation, my father and all of his siblings were born and raised in Danvers. I know they always held a special place in their hearts for their hometown and the community which helped mold them. I am delighted that I have been able to bring that feeling full circle by making my family's home here. For those of you who may not know the history of the Susie brothers, I would like to share their story with you. The Susie siblings were 6 boys and 2 girls born to French-Canadian immigrants who grew up in Danvers during the hard years of the Great Depression. Always proud of their hardy upbringing, the 6 Susie boys were self-proclaimed Danvers Port rats. Throughout their childhood, their father often struggled for work, and so the family was dependent on the boys to help the family stay afloat. Over time and through these struggles, the Susie boys and girls developed a great work ethic, a sense of service to their family, their community, and their country. When America was thrust into World War II, my father had just graduated from Holton High School, which was here, and taken a job at Sylvania with 3 of his brothers. In the span of less than a year, 5 of the 6 brothers would join the flood of patriotic young men entering the service to defend our freedom. The Susie boys were all 20 years old or younger when they went off to war. My uncle Armin joined the Marines in June of 1942, trained as a marksman, and saw action at Bougainville in the Solomon Islands, Guam, and possibly Iwo Jima. He contracted and survived malaria and was honorably discharged as a corporal in October of 1945. His twin brother, Roger, enlisted in the Army a month later in August of 1942 and served in the Medical Corps. He was sent to China, Burma, and India, and upon his return, proudly served on the honor guard for a presidential funeral and was honorably discharged in March of 1946. 4 months later, my father, Roland, joined the Marines in December of 1942. He was trained as a quartermaster and worked at length for Headquarters Company in Quantico, Virginia. In 1945, he was sent to first to Guam, then to Okinawa, Japan, and later to Tsingtao, China, to accept the surrender of Japanese forces and oversee their repatriation to Japan. Dad was honorably discharged in April of 1946, but was called back during the Korean War, where he served stateside at Camp Lejeune. He rose to the rank of Staff Sergeant and was discharged in 1952 to rejoin his growing family in Danvers on High Street. My Uncle Ray joined the Marines 3 months later, in March of 1943, and became an amphibious truck crewman in the Pacific Theater, where he served during the enemy bombing raids on the Ellis Islands and later participated in the legendary battle at Iwo Jima. He was honorably discharged in November of 1945, but rejoined the Marines during the Korean War and served through 1952, when he was honorably discharged with the rank of Staff Sergeant. A month later, my Uncle Joe enlisted in the Marines on his 18th birthday, April 9, 1944. The longest serving Susi brother, he trained with the infantry at Camp Lejeune and then was sent to sea school in San Diego, where he became a field music first class. He was on active duty through December of 1945, when he was honorably discharged with the rank of corporal, and then he rejoined the Marines a short time later and served in some capacity through at least 1962. The youngest, Philip, was underage when his brothers joined the service, but he soon followed suit when he joined the Army in April of 1946. Though the war was technically over, there was still much work to be done, and records showed that he was sent to Panama Canal for at least part of his enlistment. Though medical issues shortened his service, he was still proud to be the 6th Susi brother to serve his country during those turbulent times. Although my father and his brothers were just ordinary men who answered the call of duty during this time, what is extraordinary is the collective service and sacrifice that they gave. As a young girl, I never really had much interest in my father's military pursuits. It was not until seeing the movie Saving Private Ryan that my perspective changed. Seeing that movie left me with such profound gratitude that I dug into as much history in his service that I could find. One particular item found among my father's memorabilia has always left me in awe. This photo of the Susi brothers, all together in uniform, has become a family treasure. These young men gave up so much of their early adulthood to serve their country during a time of war and beyond. Their dedication to their country was a huge sacrifice for their family, yet their parents patriotically allowed all of their sons to serve concurrently when their help was so desperately needed at home. Given that at least 4 of the brothers went overseas to Asia and the South Pacific at the height of the war, it was truly amazing that they all came home safe. In a time before cell phones and internet connections, I cannot begin to fathom the anguish that my grandparents and aunts must have felt during those years, left to wonder when there might be a dreaded knock at the door or a telegram reporting news that no one wanted to hear. That all 6 brothers came home safely and went on to raise their families in Danvers and the surrounding communities is truly a miracle. The Susi brothers, while individually ordinary, were collectively extraordinary. Indeed, they were a band of brothers and 6 hometown heroes. In light of their incredible story and the fact that their family lived in Danversport on South Liberty Street during that time, the dedication of the Liberty Street Bridge in their honor would truly be an amazing tribute. We are so grateful for your consideration and hope that you will find the value in granting this most gracious and meaningful honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Nash. Appreciate it.
At the Danvers Veterans Council, we have a policy that if anyone wants to nominate someone, some soldier or military type of person for a memorial sign, street sign post, or anything else, they come to us, we review very specific criteria, and if we find that they meet the criteria, the next step is to submit their name with the proper format to the select board for your consideration. We have done that, and now we await your decision on whether or not you feel that the Susi family, the Susi brothers, meet the criteria so that we can formally and appropriately recognize them in town. Any questions?
Thank you, Dick. David, any comments or questions?
Yes, I totally support the request, and I think that the presentation by, is it Mrs. Nash, talking about her family tonight was one of the nicest things that I have heard in my 7 or 8 years on the board, and so I commend her, and I think that this is a wonderful, wonderful proposal. And I'm a wharf rat too. My mother was from River Street.
Thank you, David.
Gardner?
Thank you. I was moved by the letter we received and the picture, and was trying to figure out which ones, who were looking at the pictures. But thank you for that. I certainly support this. I do have 2 questions. I just want to make sure, has the town researched that somewhere in the past this hasn't been named for someone? Because obviously we want to make sure we don't forget a previous honor.
Mr. Manager?
We haven't done an incredibly deep dive in the archives, but we have reason to believe the town engineer who's here tonight did a little bit of research, and we do have reason to believe that this bridge is locally controlled and appropriate for naming at this point.
And given that, how do you anticipate, not just naming it, but putting a plaque or something identifying it as the Susi Brothers Bridge or whatever the right nomenclature you're going to use, right there on site?
That's a very good question, and Janine and I have talked about that in some detail. If you're familiar with the Liberty Street Bridge, you know, it's fairly long and it has 2 outlets, and in the middle it's like a rock formation. And the other day I was driving down Water Street and I saw how the Danvers Port Bridge was named, and on one end and the other end they had the sign that says Danvers Port Bridge. People from Salem area, people leaving Danvers can see it before they actually go over the bridge. So something along that concept we thought might be doable. We would put one sign at one side, the other sign on the other side. What exactly we put on the sign, we're still talking about that, and we would certainly be willing to listen to any kind of recommendations. A couple of things have gone by our thoughts. We would put either the Susi Family Memorial Bridge or the Susi Brothers Memorial Bridge. We haven't quite made up our mind on that. And of course, I'm deferring to Janine and her family what she would prefer. We also thought that if it was possible, about in the middle of the bridge, I think everybody remembers that there's a camera up there, and I don't know whose camera that is, but about that same position, there might be a possibility of doing something like they've done on the witchcraft memorial up on Hobart Street. They had a plaque about this large, and they very quickly wrote about the witchcraft hysteria. Might be able to do something along those lines to better honor her family. That's all up in the air. We just wanted to see whether this was something that could be approved first.
Sure. Just to dispel any conspiracy theories, that camera is part of the National Waterways and the Coast Guard to watch the waterways itself. It's not a town camera.
Oh, thank you. I thought they put it up there to watch our plaque.
Keep an eye on the ducks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Maureen?
First of all, Dick, thank you for everything you do for our veterans. And, you know, it's wonderful. And Janine, this is wonderful. You must be so proud of your family. I am too, also in favor of this. I just like to, when something of an extraordinary nature comes along, it's important that we spend time reflecting on the action of our hometown heroes. I mean, it's clearly, you know, clearly my belief that the Susi brothers are heroes. The parents are heroes for letting all 6 boys, you know, go to war. You know, myself, I'm a daughter of a veteran whose father was in the Navy that served in the Korean War too. So we understand, you know, the uncles and everything. I am so in favor of this. What else did I just wanted? The Susie boys, I think I even went to school with some of the relatives too, their sons too. And I love this idea and fully support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen.
Bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dick, Janine, this is an awesome idea. I wrote a book about 40 years ago, A History of the Church in Danvers, up at the First Church, and we did a bit about the veterans, and I had pictures of all the veterans, and there were a couple of families that had 2 people to go to war. But this being 6 members of the family is just unbelievable. I didn't realize there was that many of the Susies that went to war like that, and I would very strongly recommend that we name it the Family Bridge, because I can't imagine the angst and worry that the parents had while 6 of their sons were overseas. I know my brother was in the Army Air Corps at this time, and although I wasn't old enough to remember, later I knew that it was a big issue with the parents, because they had so much they didn't know where their sons were or their daughters were at this time. Great idea. I think it's a fantastic name for the bridge. I think it was previously known as the Spite Bridge, and I'm not going to get into that background, but it's this is a much better, positive name for this bridge, and I love the fact that this family was so dedicated to the community and would be named for this. I'm 100% behind this, and thank you, Dick, for your work. I appreciate it. And Janine, thank you very much. I've had the pleasure of knowing her in the last few years when her daughter worked for me on the farm, and she's a great family. So I wish I'm going to be voting for this, no question.
Thank you, Bill.
Bill, there is one thing too, as an additional input. One of the, and correct me if I'm wrong, Janine, one of the sisters also worked for the government. Is that correct?
Yeah, my mother was one also at the same time, and I think
Really?
that's why it would be more appropriate to have it be the family bridge rather than just the brothers bridge, because
Right.
I think the parents and the sister, they all gave, and that was the ultimate sacrifice for the greatest generation, and it's probably the best example in Danvers that we have.
Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Town Manager, the agenda says that we'll hear a request. Is there action we need to take? We heard the request.
So the policy, the ink on the policy is still drying. The way that the policy is written is that when a resident has an idea, they would approach the board, discuss that idea with the board. In many cases, the board may wish to send the applicant back to have discussion with relevant stakeholder groups. Given that this was the request that prompted the creation of the policy, I think if the board's comfortable accepting the request tonight, it could move forward. And just as a side note, as we're thinking about this policy working in real life, nobody would go out and create the monument or the plaque prior to having approval from the board. So I think it would make sense, once a design and wording is selected, that would come back to the board for approval as any other gift would, because this essentially is giving permission to proceed. The design itself should come back for approval by the board. I think one other thing we'd want to make sure is that the look of this sign is consistent with some of the other commemorative signage we have on bridges elsewhere, so that we don't have 3 or 4 or 5 different designs, but that we could work very closely with the applicant to make sure that happens.
Okay, good suggestion. We'll do that.
Thank you. So I'm certainly in favor of this, honoring the Susie family. Certainly in favor of putting it on that Liberty Street Bridge. And you'll work on the design and come back to this board at some future date. But I think if we have a motion from the board that we support the naming of the Liberty Street Bridge to the Susie family, if I can say that, then everybody can move forward, and at your Memorial Day ceremony, you can announce it.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we accept the presentation from the Veterans Council and support the naming of the Liberty Street Bridge as the Susie Family Memorial Bridge.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Thank you, Dick. Mrs. Nash, thank you very much for coming tonight. We appreciate it. We look forward
Thank you,
to
Dan.
seeing the design.
Thank you very much to everybody.
Thank you. The board will vote to accept a gift in accordance with Mass Generalized Chapter 44, Section 53A. Mr. Town Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ken Reardon, who's here and spoke on the previous agenda item, had submitted materials that were distributed to this board at their last meeting. Due to a conflict, it was postponed to this meeting. So you did receive the materials previously, including a color image of a plaque that Mr. Reardon has prepared and would like to gift to the town. And I think with that, I would defer to Mr. Reardon and give him a chance to address the board.
Ken? All right. Go up this.
Good evening. Like I said, I started with this at Walnut Grove, and then I came up with the idea, and I worked with Peter Morandi and Dick Moody, and I had a plaque made. I've been sitting on it for a year. Because of the pandemic, I backed away from it a little bit. It's actually been under my bed for about a year. So tonight I'd like to present it to the town. It's a 16 by 24 bronze plaque. I had it made down in Pennsylvania. And like I say, I worked with Dick Moody and Peter on some of the wording, and it's going to be mounted on a piece of granite. Any of you people familiar with the stone that they used to grind the meal and bone, they made bone meal out of it. And Al up at, that works with Bill Clark up at the farm, told me that this was a good high-grade granite because when they made these wheels, there was so much labor involved. It's a high-quality granite. And I was looking to have it mounted down in front of Town Hall next to the American flag to thank our veterans and our military. And I believe the board has the picture of the plaque, and I can read it to the other people that don't have it. I mean, that's a picture of it. And it says, all gave some gave all, dedicated to the Americans' first militia and all branches of the U.S. Armed Services, to the men and women of the past, the present, and the future who protect us in all conflicts and wars. It is our military members who give us our protection and freedom today. And down the bottom it says, we thank our military and veterans for their service. And it has all the emblems of the armed services. It has the Marines, the Navy, Coast Guard. We had to get Peter Morandi in there. And the Navy and the new branch of the service, the Space Force. So there's 6 emblems on the plaque. And I'd like to see it mounted down at Town Hall next to the American flag. I have the piece of granite. I cleaned it all down. I sandblasted it. And it's pretty much ready to go. My son Travis has helped me with it. He's with the Parks and Grounds in Danvers. And I'd like to donate it to the town from me and my wife Donna and my family, and dedicate it to the armed services of veterans and military.
Thank you, Ken. Ken, what is America's first militia?
What's that?
What is or was America's first militia?
Well, it goes, I'm trying to thank all the branches that gave us America today, the first militia, all the way up from the past, the present, and the future, all branches of the military.
Yeah, those were the...
You have to go to a microphone, Dick.
There's one over there.
Right up here.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. This is Dick Moody again. The first militia, and the reason that Ken wanted to do this is to incorporate all of the men and women who represented Danvers. And the first militia were basically the Minutemen. They weren't called the Minutemen. They were called the militia. And they're the ones that trained on the training field up on Center Street. They're the ones that went down to Lexington and Concord. And from that first militia, and according to Richard, that was the first militia in the country. So that's why we called it that. If it turns out that they needed a few of the militia to be on a moment's notice, that's how the Minutemen came to be. But prior to that, the militia were the hometown men that trained and fought for their community.
So I would never argue with Richard Trask, but when I looked up America's first militia in Massachusetts, it was 1636 that the first militia was called out to fight the Indians. So
I'm sorry, I didn't hear all of that. You said the first
America's
militia?
first militia, founded in Massachusetts in 1636, was called out to fight the Indians.
Okay, that's probably true.
Did it? Well, I read it
Well, hey.
Yeah, but where?
in my research.
Just kidding, Dan.
I think that's really what Ken was getting at, though.
Well, that's what I want to know, who we're honoring.
You know, I mean, we can go back to the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, but the folks that were not particularly assigned to one of those organizations at the start of our country were formed into militias. That's why he wanted to bring that in.
I have other comments later, but we'll start with David.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the concept is brilliant and wonderful. I have concerns about the inclusion of militia in a memorial on our public grounds with the same sense of history that has been raised by the chairman, that it was a group that was fighting the original indigenous citizens of this part of the world, the Indians. The second concern that I have is that this is more, I don't know if this has gone through the new process that the board has adopted for purposes of naming things. It seems to me that the plaque at the bottom, if this is appropriate language, and I still question whether militia is, that it should be the Danvers Veterans Council rather than, and the Reardon family I've known for 70 years, so I have a great respect and history with them. But as far as this being on public ground in front of the public town hall, I didn't go across the street today to read what is on the existing monument in front of the town hall. But whatever this is should not be inconsistent with that. But I think rather than having a private family name gifting this to the town, it should be something from the Danvers Veterans Council as opposed to a private party. This makes it more a private as opposed to a public memorial. And that troubles me, especially with the attention that we've given to the reality of and the importance of paying attention to naming rights of public properties and the utilization of public properties, that it be totally and completely public as opposed to private. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you.
So I'm not in favor of accepting this as a gift. If it comes in from the Danvers Veterans Council, and if indeed they insist that militia be on there, I still probably would be opposed to that. And I also wonder, the United States Space Force, and I'd rely upon Dick Moody on this, is that a recognized branch of the United States military? Oh, that's surprising, okay.
I looked that up too, David, and the commanding officer is a guy by the name of Joe Biden.
Joe Biden?
Yes.
The same one?
Same one.
Oh, I'll be darned. Okay, thank you.
It is legit. It's only a couple of years old. Phil?
I wasn't prepared to have people oppose this proposal. I thought it was a very generous proposal by the Reardon family. Maybe they can rework it and work through the Veterans Council to have it given to the town through the Veterans Council. So I think we ought to table this at the present time and have further discussion with the Veterans Council on this issue.
Maureen?
Ken, thank you. I accept this. If I can be a board member that would accept it, I'm all in favor for it. And maybe just the militia name. You know, I'm not sure about that, but on the plaque, but, and go through the Veterans Council good, but I thank you and your family for doing this.
Thank you. Gardner?
So I like the plaque, and in my relationship to Richard, this is going to sound odd, but I think that when you put America's First Militia there, people immediately think to those who marched to Lexington Green. And that's the thought. I realize that there is now a connotation that I didn't actually know until you brought it up, Dan, to a militia being formed as, to fight the indigenous people. I'm wondering how official, whether that's just the term they used or whether they were named a militia, as opposed to the group of people who worked on the green were a militia, in not just a description of them, but in name. I actually don't have a problem with the words militia. What I'm trying to get in my head is a picture of where this is going to be, Ken. I know as I stand on the town hall steps looking out, I'm looking across where we lay the wreath in front of the monument that's in that center section. And I'm wondering, is there either room on that, because I don't know if it's all four sides are covered, or what is your vision of, and what I'm hearing you say, it's like a gristmill stone, round stone. What is your vision of where that goes? Is it further past that? Or is it right next to the flagpole? I'm trying to, in my mind's eye, I'm trying to picture what it looks like on Danvers.
When you go down the walkway,
yeah,
your branches off.
Okay.
State flag is over here, the American flag is over here, there's some shrubs, and then there's the big monument.
Yep.
And there's I think it's a Vietnam monument. So just in front of that, to the left of that flagpole on the grass, it would be mounted there.
Okay, I'm just trying to picture the
So when
symmetry.
you went
of
down
it
that
all.
walkway to the flagpole, it'd be right there on your left, facing Town Hall.
So I'll say that I have no problem with the words militia at this point. It's obvious the plaque's already made. And I actually learned and didn't realize that the Marines were under the Department of the Navy. It's new to me. I thought they were their own branch, independent of the Navy, but so I learned something by the plaque. Excuse me. I hear the other comments by the other selectmen, and if we think it needs to be tabled for further discussion, I'll support that.
So, if I may, I took a walk up to Town Hall the other day to kind of visualize where you may put that. And we have that large Civil War monument, and in front of that is a smaller monument that has World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam on different sides of that monument. In front of that's a nice little garden area where the wreath goes. And there's a stone there donated by Rotary in 1975. And I can't remember what the purpose of that was. And to digress, that Civil War monument is in terrible, terrible shape. It looks like some kids put some rocks underneath it to keep it from flipping over. The grouting has fallen out, if it hasn't already fallen out between the granite blocks. Water's getting in there, is gonna freeze and destroy that monument. I don't know who's gonna fix it. And to hear Ken, what he did for that Medal of Honor recipient, it makes me wonder, do we have other veteran memorials in as bad a shape throughout the town? I would hope that the Veterans Council with our veterans agent would take an inventory of these items and make an assessment of what needs to be done. I think that's very important. And I don't know how we pay for these things. I mean, if we had a CPA fund, we could dedicate funds for that, but we don't. So I would ask Dick if you would work with Kelly and kind of inventory these things. Let us know what needs work. Establish a fund, a GoFundMe fund, something to raise money to bring these monuments up to respectable shape. And start the fund, and I'll give you $500 to start it. I feel that strongly about it. We need to do something. Now to get back to Mr. Reardon's request. I think I would support tabling it. I'm not in favor of putting it in front of Town Hall. We have monuments dedicated to fallen individuals from the town of Danvers. I think the plaque itself might be better served if it was at a cemetery honoring veterans, is my thought. But that's where I'm at. If the board wants to make a motion to table this so we can further discuss it, and does it fit in with our policy, and where do we really want to put this plaque, I think is paramount.
Mr. Speaker, could I just say a word?
Chairman, not speaker, thank you.
First of all, I see exactly what you're talking about as far as the condition of the monuments, and it is certainly something we need to look at. I'm not sure, like you mentioned, that big rock right in the junction of the Y there at the walkways, dedicated or donated by the Rotary Club in 1975, I think it was. I don't know what was donated. Maybe it was the plaque behind them. I don't know. That would be a perfect location for his plaque because it's all encompassing all of the veterans. And I know we're going to table this and look for it, but we really do need to, I think, keep an open mind as to where to put it. If you were, and people, I'm just asking you, if you were to walk down to that junction, turn to your right and start going toward the flagpole, there is a grassy spot between the monuments and the flagpole, possibly right there, facing the water. That may be a good place for it. But to David's point, as far as do we say it's a name, a gift from a particular family, if we're going to have all of the monuments and stones just public, I think that we've already gone against that by putting this rock donated by the Rotary there. Either that should come out, or we should give allowance to some other dedications. That's all I have.
Thank you.
So Mr. Chairman, if I might, I'd suggest that Ken work with the Veterans Service Officer and Dick and others and decide what they. I was ready to approve the plaque. I'm happy with the plaque. I'm not. But in my question, I'm trying to visualize the placement. And to your point, there might be other places. For example, down at Flagpole Island in the square, there is a monument, but there's a plaque on one side. Maybe it's an opportunity to put the plaque on the other side. I don't know, and I'm not suggesting that, other than between the Veteran Service Officer, Ken, and Town, and Dick, we might find a way to accommodate the plaque without a new stone monument. If that's what we're tabling it for, I'll support the table.
Is that your motion?
I think, did someone already make a motion?
Bill was.
I didn't make a motion, no.
Okay, then, because I'm hearing the will of the board, I move we table this recommendation or this acceptance of a gift till we work with all parties to identify the appropriate location for the plaque.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Ken, please work, and you'll come back to us at some point.
Okay, thank you.
As long as your Donna doesn't mind it under your bed a little longer. All right, Dick? Thank you. A public hearing will be held in accordance with Chapter 82 to lay out the following private roads in anticipation of a vote for their acceptance as public ways at the May 2021 Annual Town Meeting: Avon Road, Holly Lane, Sunset Avenue, and Vineyard Street. And it looks like Mr. King is approaching the podium. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair and members of the Select Board. The Engineering Division has spearheaded a street layout and acceptance program since 2001, roughly almost 20 years, except for the minus of last year due to COVID. But again, we've laid out 4 roads for acceptance at town meeting of this year, at the town meeting, annual town meeting, and they include Avon Road, Holly Lane, Sunset Avenue, and Vineyard Street. To date, I'm sure you guys want to hear this number, but we roughly have 52 streets left that are still unaccepted by the town. And overall through this program, we've added in 116 roadways, which gives us roughly an additional 22 miles of roadway under our Chapter 90 program. So it has been successful. We've had additional streets. We've obviously maintained some of these streets already as far as ways, as far as trash pickup, water and sewer utilities, electric service. So much of these streets have already been pretty much operated and maintained by the town Department of Public Works. We're just forwarding these streets on for acceptance at town meeting. And I'll take any questions you have.
Maureen?
No questions.
Bill?
Only question I have is, how come Vineyard Street's on this list? That's been around longer than any of us in this building.
It has been. It never officially was ever laid out as a public way. It's unbelievable. I triple checked it, went back to the predecessors and triple checked it, and there's no full actual official layout and acceptance of Vineyard Street.
I'm amazed. Whatever.
David?
Just that you do great work, Steve, and so did your predecessor, Rick, and I couldn't believe how much catch-up work there was to do, and what's being proposed tonight, we should certainly approve. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gardner?
No, I have no problem with these. I'm wondering at the pace we're setting, how long before we get them all done? And is there any way to increase the pace? Instead of 4, can we do 8 next year? I'm just wondering.
Basing off the previous approved warrant article at the 2020 town meeting, we can roughly do another 4 streets next year, but we're roughly averaging with the amount of money that's provided or appropriated through the warrant, about 4 streets a year. So if we wanted to increase that, we'd obviously put another warrant article for the 2022 town meeting to start catching up with some of these streets at a faster pace.
Well, I'm going to suggest that we may consider that money spent now is less money spent later. The money, it's not a flat fee every time. There's going to be increased costs. If it's at a pace of 4 and you have 50 left, we're talking 12 years, 12 to 13 years, and in year 10 or 12, it's going to be much more money to do the same 4, and we may consider the opportunity to accelerate that in the future. That's not your call, obviously, but that's a recommendation I'll make if I'm here to make it.
This is a public hearing. Anyone in the public? Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matthew Duggan, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. Question to the town engineer through you, Mr. Chairman. These 4 streets, they currently meet the standards that we require streets to adhere to, for example, in terms of width. And I believe they don't require any easements or any other cost to accept, that it's just a legal formality with, I think, the Registry of Deeds.
Stephen?
Mr. Chair, the newer streets, such as Holly Lane as a subdivision street, is built to the correct 1979 subdivision standards. The other streets were prior to that, so they're not exactly the specific width as what we require per our subdivision regulations. They have variable widths, but since they're so maintained as ways anyways, and most of us know them as public ways in theory, we thought these streets were acceptable to present as layouts for the town. Any other easements that are also required within these streets are also taken by the town, but there are no additional costs besides the recording fees at the Registry of Deeds.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that information. Just one last thing. So we'll be seeing in the future subdivision streets that, to me, don't meet the minimum width requirement of, I think, 50 feet. So is that something that precludes them from becoming accepted? That's the only question I have right now. That's just for future reference, because I know in the next year or two, we'll be seeing several that, where the developer was granted relief to create streets that were narrower than what we would typically require.
So, to that question, that point, is 50 feet the right number that he's referring to, for the width of a street?
It can change based on the size of the street and the traffic. If it's an arterial, if it's a collector street, it has different widths that are required through the subdivision regulations.
So 50 feet's not a set number?
It's not a set
Thank
number.
you.
All right. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Anyone else? Mr. Bradstreet?
Bill Bradstreet, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. It bothers me that it's taken so long for the town to do this. I'm not blaming the town. When someone sets up a subdivision or any kind of building, they're asked to put up a bond. At some point, when they think they're far enough along, they ask for the bond to be released, leaving the town with the obligation and the expense of accepting these ways. I cannot believe that the town would do that, knowing that at some point in the future, they're going to have to eat the expense. I don't know what it takes for the town to make sure that the bond is not released until or unless money is set aside for accepting these ways. And as Mr. Clark said, I couldn't believe when I saw Vineyard Street on there. As long as we've been around, it's been used, and it's taken this long for it to be accepted. Plus the fact that there's 52 more streets at one expense to the town to accept all these ways or streets. It just bothers me that this kind of a problem has existed for so long. And as we're saying, if you only do 4 or 6, how many years is it going to take for this to be completed? And again, at what expense to the town? When it should have been borne by the people who are responsible for building or putting the streets in place. That's enough. You're working on it, I know.
Thank you, Bill.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I could ask either the town manager or Steve, do we now, if a new subdivision were to come into town, be granted and approved, and they were going to have a street that eventually would become a town street, do we set aside or have them pay a fee or a fund that would cover the cost of accepting that later down the road?
They pay all of the costs associated with laying out and providing information for recording a street as a public way.
Okay.
And we
so
do not release, they don't release, that's part of their, when we create the tripartite agreement and the bond with the developer, we don't release that money until we have all that paperwork in place.
Okay.
So basically, for Holly Lane as a subdivision.
So this 52 is just historic, and eventually, we're not adding to it every time we add a new subdivision, in that we don't add the cost. We may add the work to do it, but the cost is covered later.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you for the answer.
Okay.
Not to put the town engineer on the spot, I think an interesting question was raised, and I'm going to defend Stephen and his staff. Between the MS4 permit and the water permit, they still have a vacancy that has been open for the majority of the pandemic. I think they would love to be able to throw resources at chopping down this list, but we need to be mindful of the existing workload. One of the interesting questions, and I haven't asked this before, but I'm going to get this wrong, but I want to say, how many miles of street do we have in Danvers that we maintain, Stephen?
We're over 150 miles of street.
And so 22 miles of the 150 or so miles of street have been accepted since 2001 under this program, and therefore now qualify under the Chapter 90 formula.
Correct.
So with the state's current funding of Chapter 90, which is roughly $200 million a year, some years there's a supplemental appropriation to increase that, but the town receives roughly $900,000 a year to support its streets. It's not as simple as dividing 150 miles of street by $900,000 to determine the value of each additional mile, but every time the engineering department goes through this process, there is an incremental positive impact on our Chapter 90 formula, and these are streets that we're maintaining anyway. So there would be some logic to accelerating this. The question, and we've never discussed this, and it's something we certainly can discuss with David Lane, whether we, to the extent we could contract out and do larger batches of these, if we could supplement the work that Stephen and his staff do. Those are conversations I think we should have. We haven't had them. And I don't want to put Stephen on the spot tonight with respect to that, but I think we understand, I think we're hearing there would be an openness to exploring different approaches to this list.
Yeah, as the list has gotten shorter, the streets have gotten tougher as far as finding the appropriate recorded documents, because most of these streets you have to go by each individual lot per se to find the actual right-of-way line and limits, because most of them could be variable width. There are some that we're just never going to accept. So the developer didn't finish them the correct way to our standards. We're never going to accept those. Just take an example, Cherry Hill. That's going to remain private for eternity. But there are some other ones that are just going to be a little bit tougher for us to go through, working with our surveyors and putting out bids and then doing the research with the surveyors, as they have a lot of questions for us as far as finding the correct documents that are recorded within the town.
And now
Thank
that
you.
you
Is there a
mention-
motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. What's the will of the board?
So, I'm sorry, just to follow up on what you said, Mr. Town Manager, if there is a return on investment, it's not just an expense, and I would really like to hear a report of, if we accelerated this to 10 a year, if we did the next 10, what could we reasonably expect in Chapter 90 money? And see how close to offsetting the increase we would really be.
I think
Because
that,
it's not only the increase in costs over the years, but the lost revenue opportunity over the years.
So what complicates that a little bit, and Stephen alluded to that, and Rick Rogers, when he was here, would say the same. There are some streets that we will never accept, because
Right.
the amount of effort that goes in, some would just be impossible to sort of tease out the information we need, or it just wouldn't be in the town's best interest. So the last 52 are different in nature than the first 116. So it would be difficult to have I think with precision, it would be difficult to answer that question, but I think generally we could offer some thoughts on that question.
Thank you.
Because we know, Stephen knows how much effort goes into these streets, and we can look at, some of them, I think we'll have a sense just looking at the names of the streets, whether these are viable or not, correct. So that's something we'd be happy to report back on.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I move that the Board of Selectmen lay out the following roadways as a public ways in the town of Danvers and recommend to the town meeting that the following roadways be accepted as public ways in the town of Danvers: Avon Road, Holly Lane, Sunset Avenue, Vineyard Street, said layouts being more particularly described in the respective layout descriptions to be executed by the Board of Selectmen.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. You're up next, too. The board will consider a request by the Engineering Division to approve and sign an easement modification at 7 Wildwood Road. Stephen?
Again, Stephen King, Town Engineer, Town of Danvers. 7 Wildwood Road was brought to my attention through the Code Administration. They received an application for a shed. The location of the shed where they proposed to put it on the property was actually confined by the property's easements, drainage easements that are existing. There are 3 actual drainage easements on the property that encompass around the side lot and the rear lot of the property. In reviewing the location of the shed and the easements, I did notice that a part of the easement line did cross through the garage of 7 Wildwood Road. I spoke to the homeowner about it and said, in reality, this should be amended for us to make sure that the easement is completely not built within any permanent structure. So I worked with the homeowner, hired a surveyor. They surveyed the lot. They confirmed that none of the existing infrastructure was at risk or damaged due to the foundation of the garage. We then made a determination that maybe the easiest way to modify the easement was to take the appropriate square footage, which is roughly just over 200 square feet, from the line that crossed through the garage and relocate it to the other side of the easement. And that's the description that you have there tonight in front of you.
Thank you. Questions, Gardner?
These are the kind of decisions that makes me a selectman tough, because you want to adhere to the law and what's going on, but you also don't want to inconvenience the homeowner. Who's paying for the effort of redoing this work? If the
homeowner.
The homeowner is,
The homeowner.
okay. So the homeowner is paying for the effort of on paper, moving the easement.
Correct.
Okay, so there is no piping under there now, there's no drainage, no sewer, no anything. It's the insurance policy, if we ever need it, we have rights to that property. Okay. Okay, then I guess that was my main point, was who's going to pay for this? The owner put themselves in the position, willingly or unwillingly, unknowingly, and now rectifying it is on them to fix it, but get everybody squared away and right.
They've
All right,
hired
I'm
the
fine with
surveyor,
that, thank
put
you.
up the plans, everything.
Okay,
Maureen?
good.
No, I'm good. Thank
Bill?
you, Steve.
No comments.
David,
Thank you, no, Mr. Chairman.
what's the will of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move we accept the proposal as offered.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, none. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
Town manager will report to the board on various items of interest. Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Briefly tonight, first I would just acknowledge the materials that you received in your packets related to the land swap. It seems like years and years ago, but it was just a year ago, heading into the pandemic, town meeting supported an exchange of property at Endicott Park and Glen Magna with the Historical Society. With this packet of information going to the senator and the representative, we can execute that transaction and button this up. So this was provided in your packets. The chair has diligently followed this issue and made sure that it made it to the finish line. And at this point, we stand ready to help the senator and the rep with whatever they need to get the legislature to bless the exchange of property. Semi-related, there has been a considerable effort, not directly involving the town, but involving the Putnam House and the descendants of Israel Putnam with the Historical Society to return the Putnam House to the family in exchange for consideration and assurances that the building will be preserved in perpetuity. And through the arrangements between the family and the society, the town, and specifically the Preservation Commission, will be the enforcing agent on the preservation of that building. That's also coming to a conclusion in the near future. So the Preservation Commission will be accepting that and signing the restriction along with me on behalf.
Do you have those restrictions?
I don't have the documents with me, but they're...
No, not with you personally, but does the town have them?
We've seen a draft. I haven't seen the final version yet, but it's close enough to completion that we're talking about signature lines on the document.
Because the Mass Historic Society won't sign it until we sign it.
Correct.
So those are the next three
And
steps.
Attorney DeLuca has been engaged with the attorney assisting the society on that.
Great, thank you.
So that's also...
Mr. Chairman, if I might, does that mean that the Preservation Commission has any fiduciary responsibility for that building?
No, it's a discretion. My understanding is we are a third party that hold it. We have discretionary enforcement authority over it. In reality, if there were a concern raised, we would simply have a town employee go and inspect the property with the preservation restriction in hand. So we do not anticipate this being considerable effort aside from staff time. No monetary consideration or responsibility. If I understood the question correctly.
And staff would only get involved if there was a violation of the restrictions.
Okay.
So they're just in writing.
I was
so-
a member. I was a member of the society that willed this over, and I'm just concerned in the manner that happened and what our obligation as a town would be to that party now. All right, thank you.
Anything else, Steve?
Just briefly, we had a successful 2 nights of Finance Committee hearings last week, and we'll be working on the warrant with the FinCom on the 26th and the 27th. We got through all of the operating budget. We didn't make it all the way through the capital, so we'll be doing some of the capital project review with Stephen King and David Lane as a part of that process on our way to town meeting. And then just finally, the Health Board will be meeting on May 6th. Unfortunately, at the same time as our meeting. Our meeting, of course, has been postponed from Tuesday due to the election, as we do every year, much to Mr. Bradstreet's chagrin. But we will, what I've asked, the health director will be discussing the status of both the vaccination efforts and rollout. There's been a collaborative effort, I believe I mentioned in a previous meeting, a grant through the MAPC has helped us secure a professional marketing group that is working along with all of the public health professionals from the North Shore so that we can have coherent and coordinated messaging heading into the warm summer months, making sure that everybody, businesses, residents are all on the same page in terms of where we are and where we're heading. And Ade Solar, our new health director, will be reporting out to the health board on the 6th. And I'll be providing all of the documents that he's reviewing with the health board to this board at that night. And I imagine my plan is to invite him to our meeting on the 20th to meet this board and to update this board on where we stand. Mr. Chairman, that's all that I had for tonight. Thank you.
Will the new health director or somebody be discussing opening up town buildings?
So the short answer is yes. And I just, for the sake of transparency, the town buildings have been open. There's a misconception that the town buildings have been closed. The town hall has been...
Let me rephrase that, for walk-in traffic.
Correct. So currently at the town hall, we've been operating on an appointment-only basis. That said, anybody who's knocked on the door has received service. So what will be changing as we move forward will be eliminating the appointment only and working on a staffing model to make sure that those who come into the building are directed to where they need to be. We still will have to maintain our occupancy limits under the reopening plan. I don't want to get too ahead of that, but the short answer is yes. That's part of what Mr. Solarn is working on and the health board will be reviewing.
Well, I know you were hopeful to open up the first week in April. You didn't. I was a little disappointed that you weren't able to open a little more fully. I understand people can get in by appointments. I understand somebody knocks on the door, they get taken care of. I understand not everybody needs to go to town hall. But we would like to kind of know what the goal is. And I certainly don't think the goal is to not do anything till COVID is eliminated, because that's not going to happen. We're going to live with COVID forever.
No, I think, a number of communities in the Boston region announced several months ago that they were going to keep the doors closed until July, because that's when the public health professionals are saying we're going to hit the magic 75% vaccination rate, which is when community immunity starts to set in. And as was explained to me recently, those of us who have been or will be vaccinated are not immune to this disease. It is 95% effective, and there's a 5% chance you can still contract COVID, and most likely the symptoms will be milder, but they can still be transmitted to those who are not yet vaccinated. And that is the concern in the public health community, is that as the weather has improved, we've been seeing fewer and fewer people wearing masks. And so, we are, the analogy that we've been using in the public health circles is that we're approaching, the 24-mile mark in the marathon, and we don't want to stop running the race right now and jeopardize the gains that we've made. And I do just want to clarify. I think, to my knowledge, and I actually asked this of a constituent who accused us of keeping the doors locked. I'm not aware of a single resident who hasn't been able to receive the service that they needed. And if anybody has an example, I would encourage them to let me know so that we can remedy it instantly. A number of folks have expressed their great displeasure that we're not back to normal yet. But no one has been able to provide an example of someone that's been unable to do business with the town. I think that's our primary concern. But like I said, I think we would like to eliminate the appointment only, because it is an inconvenience that's fully understood. And at that point, we would, at least with respect to town hall, and I want to be clear, the senior center presents a different set of challenges. That's something that Ade is working on with Pam Parkinson and Aaron Henry, is to get a sense of what the reopening looks like in that building. But with respect to Town Hall, we certainly think before July, that, and I would hope that well before July, we would be able to pivot away from the appointment-only basis so that folks who want to come don't have to call ahead, they can just show up, they'll be greeted at the door, they'll be able to do their business in that capacity.
So you think that second meeting in May, you can give us a somewhat finite time frame?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, is that agreeable to the board members to get that?
And I think, just to be clear, I think you will know ahead of it. I think that it is quite likely that by the first meeting in May, I'll be able to prepare materials for you that speak to that. But a day will be presenting to the Board of Health, and I'll invite him at the next meeting to answer questions that you may have.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
just a question, just a comment. I mean, I think Steve and his team have done a great job. I mean, we want to be safe. You know, we want the numbers down. There's so many services, you know, that you can do online, excise tax, bills, you know, water, electric bills. I like the fact that, you know, people might still want to come in, but I love how you say that they'll knock on the door. You got to check around, make sure the numbers are still safe, and let them in. So, you know, we do service our town, and I think that the staff there at the town hall, I know I've called, I've had people say, who can I call? They pick up the phone all the time. So thank you.
And Kelly's not here, but we've had instances in the past few months where our VSO has delivered documents to somebody's home, the assessing department has taken forms to somebody's home. So in instances where somebody really is inconvenienced, staff has gone to them to make sure that they get the service they need.
I kind of know that feeling too, being a loan officer. I've gone to people's houses with envelopes, you know, get them to sign. So, yeah, great job.
Thank you, Steve. Consent calendar?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Aye, opposed, none, thank you. So correspondence, new business, previous new business, David?
Nothing, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome, Gardner.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Take the opportunity, it's been my great pleasure to work beside Bill as a select board member for 15 years. I look back on the 15 years and think how much we've accomplished, how much we've done, the highs, the lows. More often than not, we're on the same side of the issue, and sometimes when we're not, and that's okay, because you don't want a select board that's all in lockstep and rubber stamp each other's ideas. So it is my sincere hope that he gets elected to town meeting so that he can continue his continuity of service to the town of Danvers, and I appreciate what he gave up to become a selectman from the perspective of his business in town. And the sacrifices he made not only there monetarily, but in the time that we as board members all know we put into this job. So to that end, I want to thank Bill for 15 years of dedicated service to the Board of Selectmen. Thank you.
Thank
you, Gardner.
Maureen?
Me too, Bill. I want to say thank you. You know, I've known you for a long time. You're definitely a Danvers townie. Love all the history that you bring to the board. It's wonderful. Thank you for your years of service. A couple of notes. Danvers Housing Authority. I have the privilege of sitting on that committee, and good news is that 240 people, the 215 are fully vaccinated, so that's about 90%. And some people naturally have declined, but that's okay. They continue to hold fast. The mask is still required. Cindy Dunn and her team, which they do a fabulous job, are looking to, increase maybe some outdoor furniture for the seniors. So that's really good. Get them outside in this wonderful fresh air. And then also, I'm on the committee with the Rail Trail, and with Matt here, he also helps out. I want to just say that Paul and Nancy McNulty, Joe Anthony, and Charlie, and many others do a fabulous job. I mean, they put a lot of time and effort into it. It's a really fun committee. They're all fun. April 22nd, which is this Thursday at 3 p.m., they're looking for any volunteers that want to meet at Hobart Street parking lot to do some cleanup. That would be great. And I think other than that, and any donations that you want to make to the Rail Trail, they're always willing to take donations, where you can put a pretty planter, with some kind of an advertisement. So you can get in touch with Larry Pearl at the Rail Trail committee. But other than that, everything's good.
Thank you. Bill, thank you for your service the last 15 years. We've worked together for 14 years. Really appreciated your input, your knowledge, the history of town. And you always make good sense when you speak.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Dan.
So this is your last meeting.
If I could have the floor for a couple of minutes.
You may.
After 15 years. I've got a few people I want to thank for my experience here as a selectman and select board member. First of all, I'd like to recognize all 8 people that I served with on the board over the years, starting with the late Stan Svensson, who was the chairman the first year I was on the board, who was very, very involved with airport issues, as were we, and he especially wanted to keep the taxes low in town. 2 members that I served about 8 years with were probably the most intelligent people I've ever dealt with, and I always envied their ability to be so articulate for their stand in certain issues. That was Keith Lucy and Mike Powers. Diane Langley for her enthusiasm, the support for youth, athletics, and her CPA focus with the 10 years of the Finance Committee she had before she served. David Mills, one of my longest-term friends here in town. David holds the distinction of being the campaign manager for the only election that I lost in the town. We had a great time, and we were part of a young generation that were mentored by several people in town and were involved in town government very young. Dan Bennett, 14 years, as you said, Gardner, 15 years. I think the 3 of us have given some stability to this board, which it drastically needed in the early 21st century. And we've gone on and had some great accomplishments, which I want to mention in a few minutes. I'm very fortunate, Maureen, as she alluded, she and I used to have heart-to-heart talks when she worked for the Danvers Savings Bank down in her office about issues in town. And I knew that when she was a very young adult, she was very interested in the community. I've known her, Maureen, since she was a student at high school. I've been very fortunate to serve with 2 of the most outstanding administrators, I think, that any town in Danvers, in Massachusetts has, Wayne Markey and Steve Bartha. When we used to go to when I went to the MMA meetings and went around with them at the trade show, it was like being with a rock star, because they were all so recognized, and basically the support they had from their peers were unbelievable. I know that when Steve came here, he had big shoes to follow. And the first year that he was here, we went to MMA, he already had all kinds of contacts he'd made, and some of them were carried over from Connecticut. His reputation preceded him in that respect. But I appreciate working with you and Wayne over the years. Some of the staff members that I really appreciate, Kathy, you are back here. Our town clerk, Kathy Ellsworth, who's been always there to help us. The former assistant town clerk, Kathy Wojtowicz, and Joe Collins, the clerk. Joe and I go back a long, long ways. We had a lot of fun, and I always appreciated the fact that if I go in the clerk's office, we get the support we need. I've got a little bit of humor here for the person who I call Madame Lafarge down at the town hall. She's the glue that holds the town hall together. And that's Ann Freitas. And a little known secret is that Ann has a wraparound mirror placed in the foyer of the town manager's office, so she can monitor people as they come up the stairs, and she knows who's coming before they get there. And she and I have had this game over the years that I go up the back stairway, so she doesn't see me till I get right our corner there, and I have a lot of fun with that. But Ann, fantastic person. I really appreciate working with her. The department heads, it was kind of interesting when I first was a selectman. We were not encouraged to talk to directly department heads in town. The former town manager didn't like us doing that, and I didn't particularly like that agreement. And I did go ahead and talk to people, and all but one of them were very cordial to me. But I want to thank David Lane for all the years of work we've done together. I first met David when I was having fire problems on the farm with my compost pile, and he was the operations manager for DPW. Rich Maloney, a former student of mine, I was very proud of. I'm sorry to see him go. Fantastic person for the town. Stephen King, Rick Rogers, engineers, fantastic work. You guys do a marvelous job, and I really appreciate it in town. I had a couple of other students. One was the former police chief, Pat Ambrose, former fire chief, Kevin Farrell, who I was very proud of when they served as the chiefs of their department. A person who I tried to get here to come to Danvers about 8 years before he did, a person who I met informally, socially through my son and daughter-in-law, was Aaron Henry, and he's certainly planning to be, he's being a fantastic individual. When I first asked him to come, if he'd consider coming to Danvers, he had just gotten in Lexington, and he said he wanted to have some time there to set up some stability before he got here to make any other career decisions. But Aaron, I really have a great deal of respect for. Peter Morandi and Mark Kaleo were the health inspectors that I worked together closely with my business and for other things in the town. People don't realize that I had a long, long relationship with Diane Norris as far as politically talking about the town. She and I have shared a lot of common feelings, and I really respected meeting with her and her husband at the MMA meetings. When he'd always come, we'd share a lot of things over dinner there. And then Pat Frazier, one of my longest, dearest friends, she and I served on an open space committee when she first got involved in town, back before she was selectman. She was instrumental in getting the APR for my property, as was Sally Kearns, and I really appreciate that. And I've always respected Pat's presence as the town moderator. The accomplishments we've had, Gardner and I were greeted the first year we were in office by the Danvers Port Blast, which was a phenomenal impact on the town, and we actually set up almost a secondary town hall down on the port to help the people down there. And then I think the next year we had the Mother's Day floods, where I remember driving around town and not even be able to go down Hobart Street because it was flooded out. There was only one or two ways to get around town during that time. We preserved the town hall, which I never thought we'd be able to do because I thought we needed the money for the high school. And one of my greatest fears about renovating an old building like that was that what happened to the original Peabody Institute Library, and lo and behold, we had a fire in the town hall when it was being renovated. And through the outstanding work of the Danvers Fire Department and the Murphy brothers, especially with their chainsaws, working at articulating, cutting out the cornices in the building without having it ruin the computer work in the building, was phenomenal. We renovated the high school, water treatment plant. Dan and I worked on a rail trail for over 20 years to get that before it happened. That was a long, long, arduous task. I have I guess a quote with that is, people said, how do you deal with the people who are your opponents for certain issues? And I bring to force Harry Truman saying, you outlive the bastards, and it worked pretty well. We got a great rail trail. The Hobart Street parking lot that Gardner and I worked on very strongly. I'm happy we got the LaBelle's Grove. I wish we could do more with it. And then the police station expansion included the dispatch center, which one of the things I remember, all five of us on the board opposed the regional dispatch center. It was kind of unusual because it was supposed to be a great deal for all the town involved, and all of us had our own individual reasons. But I can always remember the sheriff up here with 5 assistants trying to promote it to us. And I just couldn't buy the fact that he had almost as many chiefs as they had Indians up there in their proposal. My biggest frustration in 15 years was not unable to get the reservoir and the storage capacity built in Middleton that we need to alleviate our summer droughts. And finally, I want to mention 7 people who were major mentors for me in town government, starting off with my father, who was a town meeting member and finance committee member for 51 years, the last of the original town meeting members. 2 guys who were very close friends, who were very impactful in my early career in public life here, was our moderator, Frank Mills, Dave's dad, and Dan Toomey, the illustrious Irish leprechaun, who I used to always exchange hermetically sealed envelopes before elections with him every year, and Dan was almost always correct on what the outlook was going to be. Finally, 4 or 5 former selectmen, John George, I was a grad assistant for him in college. John and I went back a long ways, and I did a lot of work with John over the years. Don Ingraham, I may not be as well known, was a Danvers businessman, Tompkins Furniture, but he gave me a lot of insight and was very supportive when I was first elected. Emery Todd, who was a long-term selectman and mentor for a lot of people in town. And finally, Bill Nicholson, one of my fellow town meeting members, who has been a friend of mine now for 50 years. I want to thank this opportunity, and I hope that we continue to be able to operate a town as well as we do, because whenever we go to conventions or meetings, they look at Danvers as the epitome of what it should be. Under the Town Manager Act, we have not had an override or a debt exclusion, in the 15 years that I've been on the board even tried it, yet Marblehead might have had 50-something, Topsfield had 50-something. I realize it may affect our long-term debt, but I think we've done overall, we've been run very well. Thank you, Steve, and I thank you to Queen Marquis before you. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for letting me have this opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Bill. You'll be missed. So 2 housekeeping items. Our next meeting is May 6th, Thursday, 6 p.m. And Thursday, May 20th. Is that correct?
Yes, because the town meeting's on the 17th.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you. The 20th, also at 6 o'clock. And board members, Kathy has some papers to be signed if you can do so before you leave tonight. And with that, no other business to come before the board. Meeting adjourned. Good night, Danvers.
Good night, David.